Why aren't we on? Why isn't it working?
We are on.
Start
Good
the show.
evening, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to Hoops HD, our weekly Hoops HD report. I am your host, Chad Sherwood. We've got a full panel of Hoops HD experts here tonight, starting with who just disappeared over there. He was there a minute ago. There he is again, David Griggs. John Stoliko off to my other side. Down below me, we've got Joby Fortson. We've got John Titel. We've got Matt Sikowski, all coming to you Brady Bunch style here at Hoops HD. And we've got a lot to get to tonight, actually. We're going to be, in a little bit, going through all the major conferences, going over the news and notes of what's been going on this week. Some big news, especially as we record this here around 9:20 p.m. Eastern on Monday evening. Some big news out of the Big East with a major injury. But before we even go into that, I want to bring up another topic that we haven't discussed much this year. But I was watching several games this weekend that just seemed to drag on for the last 35 seconds of the game, taking 15 to 20 minutes. That's instant replay. I don't know how you all feel about it, but it seems to me something has to be done to get these 15 replays, each taking 5 minutes apiece at the end of the games, taken care of. And I don't know if there's a solution or not. But David, your thoughts on instant replay?
How do you not know how I feel about it? I hate it. Well, again, there's nothing more terrible than watching people watch television on television, and it seems like that's where we are with replay. I mean, I think the standard should be inconclusive evidence, and after 60 seconds, if you still can't decide, then by definition, it's not conclusive. Whatever the original call was stands, and you move on with the game. It's more disruptive stopping for 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 minutes at a time than it is to get a questionable close call right, in my opinion. Just make a call. If you want to replay it, you have 60 seconds, and then if you still can't decide after that, then the original call stands.
Even in a timing dispute?
Yeah.
Yes. Stoliko, since you've piped up, let me throw the question to you. Is the possibly going to a system where it has to be a coach's challenge to do any type of replay? Could that be a solution? Or does that, again, maybe affect the integrity of the game if there's a clear timing error like you just mentioned?
Well, I think challenging would be a solution because it would put the onus on the coach to dispute a call. But, of course, you would have to have timeouts remaining like you would in football, or your one challenge that you would get in baseball is another example.
And John Titel, you actually were on the Bracketology.fm podcast yesterday. I had a chance to listen to that earlier today, and anybody that missed it should check it out. A guest of Andy Bottoms there. And this brief discussion of instant replay came up. I thought you were kind of in favor of the system. Is that true?
I'm squarely on the fence. I mean, I do like technology, and if we can get the call right, then I'm all for getting the call right. But as David pointed out, at what cost? Like, how many minutes of my life do I have to lose to get the call right?
Well, one thing that I've actually noticed is whenever there's a review, 2 officials go over to look at the replay. And Joby, let me bring you in here. Do we really need 2 officials looking at it? Wouldn't it be quicker if we just have one person, because 2 of them are going to sit there and argue about it? And maybe that's one of our delays here.
You're probably exactly right, Chad. I mean, we're not in those conversations. We don't know, but I actually think that the way the NFL does it, and I don't like what the NFL does in a lot of ways rules-wise, but this is one of the areas where they are correct. They have one guy making a decision, whether it is some on the nationally televised games, some guy, on the booth, et cetera. But at a minimum, one guy making the decision. John's point, Stalika's point, is excellently made on a timing decision. That's like saying in the last 2 minutes in football, a turnover or scoring decision. But what the slowdown has been, I've noticed, is these who touched it when the ball went out of bounds plays. And that is perfectly suited, I think, just like did he catch it or not catch it, for a challenge. And if you're out of timeouts, you're out of timeouts on something like that. Scoring, hey, last second shot at the end of the game, did it beat the buzzer or not? Is the foot on the line or not in the final seconds? That I'm willing to go because it's so important. But I think there is a hybrid system. The NFL has shown somewhat of a path forward on this.
Well, Matt, I haven't heard from you on this issue. Do you have a take on whether one of these things we suggest as a solution? Should we just get rid of replay altogether, or what?
No, I'm for replay. I think all sports have it, and there's too many calls that would be missed without it. I would actually have that fourth official at the table, make him the replay guy, so that way maybe put a fresh set of eyes on it. He looks at it, and whatever, takes a minute or two. That's all you should really need. Get a couple of angles, and then make the call. Like, the timing of it is ridiculous, and but 2-hour games are now going 2:15 for some of these.
Well, the official the fourth person that normally is wearing an official's jersey, at least, is the official timekeeper, I believe, Dave, if I'm correct. And generally, you look at somebody who's not an on-the-court official at normal times. Are we right there? Or?
Typically, yeah.
So is he really the right person to make a decision about an on-the-court play if he's not really an on-the-court official?
Or what you do, and actually I think they ought to have a guy in reserve anyway. Do what you do in the big soccer leagues. Have a fourth official who's a trained referee on the sidelines, or he'll be in that game, the replay guy, and or if one of the main officials blows out a hamstring or something during the game, there you go. You got a replacement ready.
I think that works in the Big East and in the Pac-12, but does that work in the MEAC and the Southland, Matt?
They don't have television in the Southland, so they don't have this problem.
In the NCAA tournament, that's what they call the standby official.
Right, and it works in the NCAA tournament. I just don't know that it works in some of these smaller conferences, and maybe if you do have the Northeast Conference where every game is streamed and they do replay, for example.
Yeah, I mean, whether you have a fourth official do it or not, I think at the end of the day, surely we can figure out a way to keep the game going. You want to get the calls right, but you also don't want to disrupt the flow and the pace of the game. And sometimes when you're stopping for 10 minutes at a time to review something, that's more disruptive than just missing the call, in my opinion. So keep it moving, like 60 seconds to review it. And if you still can't tell, then it's too close to call, and whatever the original call was stands.
Well, I don't know that we're going to solve this debate here tonight, between the six of us, but I think we all do agree that something has to change because it's just getting out of hand.
Yeah. I mean, it's unwatchable, like just to watch these guys watch TV on TV over and over and over.
Well, at least in the NCAA tournament, they'll go to commercial every time so we can watch ads. So. But let me go on to our next topic, and I'm going to do is pull it up on this screen here. In fact, is that last night they announced the McDonald's All-America high school teams, and I should be pulling up on the screen right here the list of this is the East team up here first. We'll go to the West team in a second. And John Titel, let me bring you in here. So we look at the East team coming in, and we can already see that this is already Kentucky's starting lineup for next year, correct?
They have, I believe, 4 guys on the East team. The other one I want to point out is Mitchell Robinson, a 6'11 center going to Western Kentucky. If he's not the early preseason favorite for their conference rookie of the year, I don't know who is.
Well, I think they're going to give him conference rookie of the year this year. That's how good he is.
Matt, I know you follow the recruiting a lot as well. Was there anything that surprised you here? Or?
No, that's what I'm saying. I was mentioning when we were talking earlier, of these teams, the top 22 guys in the 247 composite are all in this game, and the 2-on-1, the Jalen Hands going to UCLA is like 4 spots out. And the other one that was, I think, ranked in the 40s or 50s is Charles O'Bannon Jr. And O'Bannon's kid, if we want to all age ourselves here, who remember probably him playing in college. But, yeah, this year, I don't think they did anything wild. You guys said you got Kentucky starting lineup. I'm interested to see how many of these guys actually suit up in college, because there's already 2 that I significantly doubt step 1 foot in college. One of those, DeAndre Ayton, committed to Arizona. He seems kind of hoping to get in that, but I think all the schools he went to in that is going to turn into Terrence Ferguson Part 2. And then Trayvon Duval, who's uncommitted now, looking at a few things like Kansas, Duke, Seton Hall, in that I don't think he steps foot in college either. I think he goes straight overseas somewhere. In his case, I don't think he really wants to go to college. In Aiden's case, I don't think he'll be able to.
I guess if we're looking for another example of we're all getting older, I'm looking at the Shaq of the Mac's son, Gary Trent Jr., who's committed to Duke at this point. his father, Gary Trent, was actually a prolific player for Ohio University during the 90s.
Yeah, and almost surprising. I'm seeing Joby, you're our ACC guy. I mean, we see some pair of Duke commits here, but that seems to be
Yeah.
it for the ACC.
Usually you see a lot of North Carolina as well, and you don't. You see maybe a Syracuse thrown in. You don't. Very interesting. We'll see how Miami has a recruit, has one, but that give Larinaga some credit there. What I notice is, and I want to point out, Colin Sexton from the Alabama commit. This is the big question when Avery Johnson went to Alabama was, could he recruit? He has really infused himself in the into the recruiting scene at the AAU level, and the fact he's able to start to pull kids in. Watch out for Alabama down the road. This is just the tip of the iceberg, maybe with Sexton. But you're exactly right. The lack of the high-end guys going to your traditional ACC powers. Who knows? Maybe we're going to see a shift to places like the SEC back when I mentioned that Alabama commit.
Yeah, and John T., we are seeing a lot of Pac-12 here, actually, especially for this West team. Although Matt just said that you may not have good news there at Arizona.
I fear that he's right. Although the weird thing is, they already have Markkanen, who I think most people believe is going to leave, and Dusan Ristic as a 7-foot center. It's a good problem to have if Aiden comes as another 7-foot center. I'm just surprised that he would go there, knowing all the tall talent we have there. The other one that Matt mentioned that I got to mention, Charles O'Bannon Jr. Can you imagine if you're a UCLA fan, this guy's dad and brother went there, and he goes to your arch rival. Yes, a USC team that's losing virtually nobody next year. They're all underclassmen. USC is going to be stacked next year, and the UCLA fan should be furious that O'Bannon just ditched them to go to the arch rival.
Matt, I'm sorry, you had a comment as well?
Well, I had one in, and I'll get another because, First of all, on the ACC point, Quade agreed it looked for the longest time was going to Syracuse. They recruit from years. Syracuse always recruited well down in Philly, and then Coach Cal did what Coach Cal does the last minute after I think when things weren't looking so. Trae Young, who's uncommitted now, but I think was telling Kentucky no, that he's not coming in the spring. He goes, pushes for Green at the last minute, and hurt Syracuse in a spot where they really could not afford to lose because you see this year, they don't have any point guard play, and now don't have one coming in next year. Now, real quick on Charles O'Bannon, UCLA looked, but they actually were not super hard after him. I mean, they got another kid, Jalen Hands, coming. You'll still you have a kid who should be back next year, pretty talented guy named Prince Ali, a 2/3 sitting out, who I think will come back in to the starting lineup next year. And I figure Aaron Holiday will also be back. So UCLA didn't need a ton in the backcourt, so that's probably why they took a look at O'Bannon, but weren't the hardest after him.
Yeah, and you got Chris Wilkes there, who is on the top side there too. You see him as UCLA commit as a three type of guy. But let's go on to a couple other topics here. And in fact, the next topic we want to hit before we actually start looking at the conferences is an announcement by the NCAA this past week that they will be holding, and this may be in lieu of the media brackets, which I haven't heard anything about, media meetings where the media gets together and goes through the exercise, but they're actually getting together with several of the big metrics guys, including Ken Pomeroy, the guy that runs the KPI, the guy that runs the BPI for ESPN. I think Jeff Sagarin's going to be in a lot of these metrics guys to try to review whether or not the metrics they're using, I guess, are proper or what else they should be using. And David, do you think this is a good idea to almost be saying, hey, this is part of the step of maybe the RPI is just not what it needs to be?
I don't think it's a bad idea, but what does the RPI need to be? I guess that's the real question. And in my opinion, it's supposed to be a general indicator, sort of like looking at a team's record. It's not supposed to be a power rating. The committee's supposed to come up with, among the 10 of them, what they think the power ratings are. And the RPI is nothing more than a tool. If you want to come up with an ultimate power rating, then yeah, it's not sufficient. But if you want to use it as a general indicator, which I've always been told and have always believed that's what it's used for, then there's nothing wrong with the RPI. It's like saying, well, we need to get a team's overall record or win percentage off their profile. No, you don't.
Well, and David, you were invited to this meeting, correct?
Yes. Well, no, but I'm going. So.
Okay. But Joby, do you think that this is a good idea for the NCAA actually saying, we're really taking a serious hard look at some of these other metrics?
As long as there is transparency to the process, I don't care if they go with. As I think what David said on the RPI is spot on. As a general indicator, I think KenPom's a very good rating. I don't know as much about KPI, but these are good ratings. Let's, Sagarin, if you're a gambler, that's a very solid one, especially the predictor rating. But tell the public how you're going to use this. Show how you're going to use this. What I very much fear is the NCAA goes, look, we've listened to all the stats guys. Oh, but we're not going to tell you how we've put together this super rating. And we're going to keep it in our little basket. And so you can't question us when we release Tulsa in the field or release UCLA in the field. So, well, we had them good on our ratings. And everybody's, what? I mean, you've got to be transparent to the process. I'm not saying let people in the decision-making room, but you must reveal the tools you're using, or it leads to doubt and it leads to questions of collusion, etc. There has to be transparency. And I have a lot of fears, because it's the NCAA we're talking about here, that this is maybe a move to try to shift away from the relatively transparent process for a closed-door committee that exists right now.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the women's selection committee, they do, reveal like a fixed number of teams as far as who is ranked where. I don't see that happening for the men's committee anytime soon, but I think to Joby's point, just exactly what are they going to reveal to the public here?
Well, Tytel, you are our expert at predicting what the committee is going to do, number 3 in the Bracket Matrix over the past few years. Are you worried that using your same formula, you may be way off this year?
I'm more worried that I'm going to get put out of business, because if they put together this number 1 metric system and they use it every year as the be-all and end-all by throwing everything into a supercomputer, hitting a button and having it spit out 1 through 68, there's no need for me. I'm out of business, unfortunately.
I think it's going to really go that far. Do you really think it could go that far that we just get rid of the committee and just go with the computer?
I mean, what's the point of doing a metric? Just for the hell of it? I assume it's to try to rank them as thoroughly as possible, like inputting every single possible thing. If NC State has a weather issue, if South Carolina is missing Sindarius Thornwell due to suspension, just put it all on a computer, hit play, hit enter, and see what happens.
I hope it doesn't come to that point either, because I think there has to be a human element to this.
The BCS works so beautifully when it completes with the computers almost solely. So yeah, that didn't have pushback at all.
Yeah, well, I hope it doesn't go that far, Tytel. I really don't, because I think that we'll be doing nothing on these podcasts other than discussing how some recent games went, because everything else will be gone. But speaking about how recent games went, I guess that's a good segue right there into discussing some of the most recent games. And I've pulled right up here our current ACC standings, full of metrics, including RPI, KenPom, Sagarin ratings here. So we can see all the various metrics, ACC up to date, with Notre Dame actually, David, out there at 5-0 in first place, and following the most surprising result, well, not surprising, but the biggest result of the week being Florida State going down at North Carolina.
Yeah, I still really like this Florida State team. I don't think that's a loss that really sets them back at all. I think they're firmly on one of the top 2 lines. But Notre Dame, they don't have the win that really pops yet. I mean, they are 5-0, but they haven't played at North Carolina yet.
Well, they did beat Miami this week, and Salika, you think that they are a 2 seed as a result of what they did this week?
Yeah, they actually have 3 road wins so far. I mean, they've already won at Pittsburgh. They were the first team to win at Virginia Tech. They were the first team to win at Miami in about a year and a half. And if you look at what they did at home, they've beaten Clemson. They've beaten Louisville. Don't forget they've also beaten Northwestern on a neutral floor. So they don't have a monster win. They do have at least one win so far against a team that we could reasonably consider a protected seed here.
And Tytel, you told us last week, in fact, that the big team you were looking forward to how they do this week was Duke. They answer a few questions for you by going 0-2?
Some. I mean, I don't think you lose a lot by playing amazing teams like Florida State and Louisville. Yeah, it'd be nice if they were games that went down to the last possession. When you're losing by like 9 and 16 points on the road to teams that are protected and wearing white the first weekend, like, I wouldn't push the panic button. The team I want to mention is Louisville, not because of what they did on the court, but because of who they're going to have off the court. If nobody heard, I just heard recently Quentin Snyder, their point guard, is out 2 to 3 weeks due to a strained hip flexor from the game against Duke.
Ooh.
And I don't think it's necessarily going to make or break their season, but obviously when you have tough teams in the ACC, their next finish out January, host Clemson at Florida State, at Pitt, host NC State. I don't think they're winning all 4 of those games. Hopefully they can get a 2-2 split.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up Louisville's profile here. Matt, you also had a comment about Duke, though, as well?
Well, yeah, I say Emil Jefferson set up both those games for Duke, and they don't think it's going to be a long-term injury. They think it's like a bone bruise in his foot, so I would think maybe he misses another week at most, but it's in a really tough way to evaluate Duke given their injuries. Now Coach K being out, you add another one to where if they're healthy at the end of the year, they're going to be a real confounding evaluation.
Joby, you're our ACC guy, and I actually want to do a little blind resume here. In fact, I have the resume up here. You'll probably be able to figure out who it is in about 2 seconds, but you can't actually see the team name here. You see 4 top 50 wins, including 2 on the road right here. Only 1 loss outside the top 100. Is this a team we got to start talking about?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
no.
This team
No, we don't.
Right
We do
now.
not have to.
right now is in the field.
And
Right
I'll
No,
pull down the
right
name and reveal it here.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Right now they're in the field. They need to continue to win, but they won at NC State this week. You know, I mean,
No, you didn't.
I would have thought they would have lost that game. Rothstein said they weren't going to win a game, as Lee Del Vecchio points out.
Right. Toby, you must not have seen the paper this morning. They opted to not go out to 128 teams this year.
Look at the wins. I mean, plain and simple, the losses. Penn State, and we'll get to it when it goes to the Big Ten. A Penn State road loss might not be so bad now. So this is a resume, especially since the bubble is one of the weaker we've seen. I mean, I said this earlier in the week, and with Miami's win, I'd take it back a little. But, until Miami got their win, this was a better resume than Miami's. And, to put ACC versus ACC right now.
David, do you want to take the counterpoint on this argument here on Georgia Tech?
Yes, it's Georgia Tech. Josh Pastner is the coach, and I just don't think they belong in based on those 2 things.
As weird as it sounds, David, it's actually an upgrade over Brian Gregory.
Yes, it is an upgrade. I like them as an NIT team.
We just wanted to Joe, but can you just, John T., I think you had this question for, but I'll read it out for you. Can you just tell us the score of the game against Duke for Georgia Tech?
110 to 57.
That's not that good. But Tytel, when you look at this and when you look at the garbage down near the bubble, I know you just did a bracket yesterday. Don't those 4 wins pop for you a little bit?
It doesn't matter if the North Carolina win alone by double digits is a shining jewel, arguably anybody's best win in the nation all season, much less beating teams like Clemson and VCU. And I agree, none of the losses are to bad teams, even though a 53-point loss is a 53-point loss. We'll see if they go into Charlottesville on January 21st and pull out a win. Then I'll be a believer. That being said, you're right. All the 11 seeds do not impress me, so I would not lose sleep about putting this team in over an Illinois or a Wichita State or something if they don't win the conference. But they're not. It's not a great resume. But none of the 11 seeds have a great resume.
Well, we're going to find out a lot about Georgia Tech. Actually, if you look at the rating schedule, five of their 6 toughest games are their next 5 games at Tech, at Virginia, at Clemson, home to Florida State and Notre Dame. It gets a lot easier after that. Include David, a huge one against Tusculum on February 7th.
Yes, I think they're losing their next 5, and then we don't need to worry about them anymore.
But it does get easier after they get through those games, including games like BC and Syracuse twice and NC State and the like.
Right.
Speaking very quickly, Bill, I want to bring up NC State here. I know you're a big fan of them, and Mark Gottfried really chewed out this team after their loss to Georgia Tech, saying that they actually had no effort whatsoever on defense.
Oh, we let them have it. This didn't make it to camera, but he told them that they were playing like NC State. Really?
Is NC State just about done at this point, Salika?
I mean, if Boston College didn't already do it, you would think Georgia Tech would do it. So naturally, I'm sure NC State is probably going to at least end up beating Pitt at home this week. And who knows what they'll do at Duke with Coach Krzyzewski still recuperating from his bad back, along with Emil Jefferson's injury issue.
Oh, I think I know what they're going to do. They're going to lose.
I was just saying, it seems like every time we're ready to write out Godfrey and NC State, they either make a huge push to get in or at least come pretty close to where, like, I want to call them done and buried. I want to say they are done. History's taught me, no, this is the formula they follow. It's like every time you think they're done for, they miraculously rise up or, like, actually start playing to their talent levels, probably more accurate, and maybe forget, like, stop listening to Godfrey. I think maybe every year they tell them what to do for a couple months, and then once the players realize, wait a minute, we're good, and the coach is an idiot, let's do our own thing. And
that's why I'm begging teams like Pitt and Duke the following day after NC State, go see your doctor and make sure you're not infected.
Just quickly, I want to take a look at the upcoming games. And Matt, while you're just stick with you here a second, looking at this week's schedule, I think this is the week of Florida State. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, this is huge for them in that, and I think 2 pretty decent times to play Notre Dame, who hasn't lost yet, and I think their run of close wins is about due to come to an end. And then Saturday, getting Louisville without Quentin Snyder, and they can play some harassing defense. They press some, and now you're playing them without your point guard. That could actually be a big Florida State win, and that, like, circumstantially, they playing them at the right time.
Let's move over to the Big East, and David, let me start with you. I think you had a chance to see the big news out of the Big East today was not Creighton's win over Xavier, though that was a huge win, but it was actually what Creighton lost in that game today.
Yeah, losing one of their key players, who's oh my God, his name is escaping.
Mo Watson.
Mo Watson Jr.
Yeah, Watson.
Their best player.
Right.
Leading the country in assists.
Yes. Watson. Hopefully it is not long term, because Creighton really is having a program-defining season. Only one loss. It was a close one to Villanova. Got a huge win today. And to put it into perspective, this is a team that's never been to the Sweet 16, at least not since the tournament went out to 64 teams. Never been this high in the rankings. And to my knowledge, I can't recall them ever beating a ranked team on the road like this the way they did today. But yeah, to lose Watson like that when things are going so well for them, hopefully he's scheduled to have an NRI, I believe, tomorrow. Hopefully he's okay and back soon.
The preliminary reports I heard is it might be a meniscus, am I correct, Matt? And which could be a 4 to 6 week deal as opposed to season at least.
Yeah, the meniscus, if they just shave it, it's 4 to 6 weeks. He'd probably be back. If, like Adrian Peterson did for the Vikings, if he's totally torn it, they can't do that. They have to fully repair. He's unfortunately out for the season.
Now, this wasn't actually the first injury scare for Watson, because if you remember the end of the Creighton-Butler game last week, he had actually banged knees with a Butler player in the final minutes and actually managed to get up with a little bit of a theatric. But I guess once he got injured today the first time and actually came back a couple minutes later, it became apparent he was not going to be returning to the floor, at least for the foreseeable future today. So best wishes that he gets well soon.
Well, and Titel, the other story, I guess, in the Big East is actually it was a real rough week for Stalika's team, losing both to Villanova, then losing again today to Creighton and Butler as well. Three losses since we last had our last Hopes HD report. Is Xavier? I'm not talking about making tournament in trouble, but is this cause for concern here? Do you think for the Xavier team?
I certainly don't like a 25-point loss, although when you're going to the defending national champs, that's explainable. I don't love a 5-point loss at home, but when you're talking about a top 15 team, I can explain it. I'll defer to the other John, but I can't remember a team having to play 3 top 15 teams within a 7-day stretch. That's pretty rough, right?
Stalika, is that all it is? It's just it was a bad scheduling quirk?
I don't think it's necessarily bad scheduling, but you also have to go back to the Colorado game where you're looking at 3 games that could just as easily been wins. I mean, let's not forget they were down 12 against Creighton today, but managed to actually get a lead in the final minute. But they were unable to stop the Blue Jays from getting a lay-in and actually missed, I think, 3 layups after a missed 3 in the final minute. So unable to pull away.
And Joby, Villanova, another 2-0 week, beating Xavier, completely dismantling Seton Hall this evening. It was just ugly. Now back up to number 1 in the AP poll. Actually, 2 in the coaches, 1 in the AP. I mean,
they're number 1.
Team just really is number 1.
I have them ahead of Kansas in my own personal. Any formulas, any eye test. I mean, how can you deny what they have done? And today was, I think, a microcosm of how well they've played, because they played one of these 11, 10 seeds in Seton Hall. I know, and some of you guys even say 8 or 9 seed. And they just dismantled. It was as if they were playing DePaul, not Seton Hall. And it just goes to show how good this team is and how tough they are. They have a toughness that you didn't think was going to extend when Okachefu left last year. I love them. I mean, they are we talk, I know people talk Kentucky and North Carolina even after today and UCLA. I don't see how you can get away from Baylor. I don't see how I can get away from Villanova.
The funny thing is, Joby, if you saw the Villanova-DePaul game on opening night for the Big East, that was as close as we came to what easily would have been the biggest upset in this version of the Big East.
That's very true. Thanks for reminding. Yes.
Well, Matt, if we look at the upcoming games, I think obviously because they played today being Monday, only one set of games coming up this weekend for the rest of for the Big East. The best game, I think, it involves your team there, Marquette, as well.
And this is one after. It's a big game now that, after blowing the one today, and then for Marquette, if they don't want to be sweating buckets in Selection Sunday, here's an opportunity. You're playing Creighton without your point guard. The one thing Marquette does remotely well on defense is can turn you over. And if you have either Foster or Thomas filling in as auxiliary point guard or the other kid, their backup, Tyler Clement, either way, this is a gold opportunity for Marquette. And one thing, Creighton, not great defensively, so Marquette's offense, and maybe they turn over, this could be a golden opportunity to rectify today's collapse.
And Titel, I believe you want to predict a huge upset in Sunday's Georgetown-Xavier game, correct?
You believe incorrectly. I don't do a lot of guarantees, but I would bet a couple months' rent that Georgetown is going down to Xavier. Hosting Providence, down double digits at the Verizon Center at halftime, 1 of 13 from behind the arc. John S., your team is going to bounce back.
But then after that, they get Cincinnati next week, so it's going to be a short-lived bounce back, I think.
And then a trap game at the Johnnies. I know how this script goes.
Let's switch over to the Big Ten now. And, David, let me start off with you here. Maryland suddenly at 4-1 off in first place. Is it time to really start taking the Terrapins seriously? They did break into the top 25 poll this week.
No, you kind of have to. It's 16-2 overall. I don't like them to win the Big Ten. I mean, I think that Nebraska is still still right now just a game behind them is the team they're only going to what? Is it something you said?
I just need to go to somebody else at this point. Tytel, let me bring you in here. Purdue suffered
Tim,
one of the bigger upset losses,
coaching.
losing the game to Iowa this week, actually.
Huge upset. Iowa is a bad team this year. They have Peter Druck and not much else. I love Coach McCaffrey as a former Penn guy, but this is the kind of game that Purdue, with their experience and their talent and scoring spread out throughout the starting five, should be able to beat them at home, on the road, at a neutral site, and they just did not take care of business. Again, not a panic button thing, and I think they're going to bounce back Tuesday when they host Illinois. Just a poor performance, frankly.
And Joby, last week we sat here and we praised Minnesota. They promptly went 0-2 this week, losing first to Michigan State and then to Penn State.
Yeah, shows what you look at when you take a Polaroid picture. It doesn't last. It doesn't foresee the future. Yeah, I will tout what Minnesota's resume was then. It's still pretty good. I mean, let's face it, they've beaten three tournament teams, if you include Arkansas as a tournament team. I know they're right on the bubble. But this is a good team. Minnesota is going to be fine long term. I think it says more about all of a sudden you're seeing Penn State. I'm just going to say it. I'm just saying it. Not yet, but they're coming if they keep this up.
I'll tell you what, I'll pull the resume up here, and I'll tell you, I mean, I think the one team that kind of did good this week was actually Northwestern. It completely dismantled Iowa in the Sunday night game. But here's that Penn State resume, first of all. A few bad things, including Albany and George Mason at home, Joby, but you got Michigan State and Minnesota up there.
And Georgia Tech, who, as of right now, I believe is in the field.
Oh,
We still have to bounce back to that. But when you look at this, when you look at things like the Ken Pom ratings and the Sagarin ratings, everybody, all 13 Big Ten teams are in the top 100 in pretty much all the metrics here. David, we're going to have a crazy Big Ten the rest of the way. Doesn't that look that way? You have things like Ohio State yesterday beating Michigan State, among others.
yeah, I mean, it's been pretty crazy so far. The only thing that's really holding serve is that 14th team that really isn't in the
I only see 13 on my screen.
Yes.
But Slika, is there anything you're looking forward to this week in the upcoming games that you're really circling?
Yeah, I'm looking at a team like Illinois who the good news for them is they don't have to play Maryland anymore in the regular season. But the bad news is you're now going to Purdue and Michigan trying to steal a game there. It's going to be difficult for the John Gross fan club to get a win out of that bunch.
Yeah, I'd say the other two games I'm really looking at here, this Michigan State-Indiana game and this Wisconsin-Minnesota game coming up on Saturday. I think they both could be very interesting games moving forward. But let's keep moving on here. Let's go over to the Big 12 and let's see here. David, let me start off with you. What are you seeing here in the Big 12 from what we've seen this past week, as we do see Kansas now number one in the nation in the coaches poll?
Right. And it's just what a shock to see Kansas atop the Big 12 standings. Wow. There's some of that coming.
Well, do you think Kansas is the better team than Baylor right now, then?
Yes, I do. I always have. I thought for a while Baylor had better credentials. Their paper was a little better, but really at no point have I ever thought that Kansas was not the best team. They lost their first game in overtime and have not lost since. And as we're recording this live on tape delay, they have a lead at Iowa State. I think that they're the best team in the conference, maybe in the country.
Well, Tytel, if we're looking at this Big 12 as three incredible powerhouses and then maybe one or two bubble teams.
Yes, and not just powerhouses like. Well, no, I think that's actually a good description. I mean, I think Kansas is a lock for a 1 seed right now. I think Baylor was when they were undefeated, obviously, and now like 1 or 2. Kansas goes to West Virginia, I believe, on January 24th. And I think they're projected to lose that game. And then they have to go to Kentucky. Like, talk about bad scheduling. Good Lord. It really is like a clear delineation of 3 and then below. I still wouldn't give up on a TCU, Iowa State, Texas Tech. I think they're going to be in the mix all season long. But I also wouldn't – as bad as Baylor looked, I believe they committed 20 9 turnovers against West Virginia in the 21-point loss. That was terrible for a number one seed or number one team or any team. West Virginia is kind of this alien, unique thing that you can't simulate it in practice, I don't think. It's just on another level.
Well, Joby, is there anything you're looking forward to here in this next week here among these key upcoming games?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I said earlier. I think the bottom of the Big 12, the bottom of the bubble
What
for the Big 12, there's so many bubble teams that are either in or out. There's only going to be space for one or two. And TCU at Texas Tech is a great example of the type of game that's going to define the rest of the season for those teams. TCU at Texas Tech, winner is probably in as of the day after, if you did a bracket then. The loser is out as of the day after the bracket. A lot can change over the next month and a half, but it's those sort of games that will define whether you're dancing or not in March.
And
We
TCU
need
will have
the border war back. It needs to come back.
David, it's on the schedule right there.
No.
Under never. I just want to point the other.
Kansas play Kentucky. They need to be playing Missouri in that Big 12 SEC challenge.
Let's hop over to the Pac-12, and Matt, let me bring you in here on the Pac-12, where Arizona and Oregon both sitting at 5-0, UCLA there at 5-1. Are we looking at a similar situation as the Big 12 with 3 clear teams that are just way above everybody else?
Oh, yeah. Look, and I think this is a case where I think the ratings are pretty accurate. Yeah, UCLA at 12 and Ken Pop, I think they are a little better than that. Arizona at 16, about right. Oregon at 21, maybe a little low. But then we see Cal at 51, Utah 52, USC 57. I think there is a divide like that to where you have 3 teams I think will be all in the hunt for a protected seed. Arizona's profile, most of all, needs to improve a little, but those 3 you'll see at UCLA 1 or 2, I think Oregon 4 or 5, Arizona 5 or 6 at the end of the day, and then hello Dayton for maybe 1 or 2 of these, and then hello the NIT for a couple others, and hello to nothing or the CBI or the AC-16.
Well, I guess the team David, that maybe is worth a little bit of discussion here is this Utah team. They did get their first big win of the year over USC there.
Yeah, they've been kind of a surprise this year, to the point to where I think they might actually sneak into the tournament, especially when you consider how weak the bubble is. Didn't get it done against UCLA this past weekend, but played really well, put themselves in a position to win it, and did get the nice win against USC, blew them out actually. Went to Arizona, and again, not getting the win, but at least made them sweat a little bit. I like this Utah team, and at the end of the day, I think they still have some work to do, but that they're good enough to get it done.
Well, one of the problems they have is they may not have that many chances here. Oregon, at Cal, at Oregon, home to Cal. They're done with UCLA. They're done with USC. They're done with Arizona. That might be their biggest problem.
If they hold serve, I think that I think their profile will get there so long as they hold serve and win all the games that they're supposed to win.
Which is everything but the 2 Oregon games.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if that'd be
I think it would be enough, David. I do agree with you, but they slip up against one of the Washington schools or Oregon State or Colorado. They just slip up once, and whoa, they're out. You can't have. They're one bad loss away from being completely removed without an Oregon win or a Cal sweep.
Yeah, one of the teams I don't like that you mentioned is Oregon State. I just don't think they're going to get back in it.
Okay. John T., your team, the Arizona Wildcats, has a huge game coming up on Saturday here. Is this where we finally figure out who the best team in the Pac-12 is?
It is, with apologies to Ducks fans. However, I don't think you should just gloss over that Thursday trip to Watts. Last year, I was at a bar on January 9th, 2016, when Arizona lost 103-101 in quadruple overtime to the Trojans. One of my favorite stats of last year, Elijah Stewart of the Trojans played 49 minutes off the bench. When have you ever heard of such a thing? 49 minutes off the bench. I don't know if Alonzo Trier is going to make his season debut. I don't know if it's going to go 7 overtimes. But needless to say, as much as that UCLA game is the star of the show, I am not just walking over that USC game because after sitting through a 4 overtime loss, I need a little revenge.
Okay, let's take a quick peek over here at the SEC. Stalika, let me bring it in here. Kentucky, Florida, and Angry Frank's South Carolina team all undefeated. Kentucky struggled a little bit with Vanderbilt actually this week, winning by 6. Almost a little bit surprised by that. Florida got the big overtime win over Georgia.
Well, I think you just nailed it. Kentucky actually won at Vanderbilt for a change because usually you can count on them to slip up there. I mean, South Carolina had no problem whatsoever with Ole Miss this week, but I was actually going to point out Florida's win first because they actually trailed against Georgia for a good part of that game before going to overtime and surviving that one.
And David, we kind of spoke about this with both the Big 12 and the Pac-12. Are we in another conference here where we got 3 teams and maybe some bubble?
I think we're in a conference here with 3 teams.
And that's it. No bubble.
I'm not big on Arkansas. I realize that a lot of people have been putting them into their pool, but it looks to me like their profile is basically home bye games, and that's it. They haven't won anything that's really hard to win. And now that their schedule's gotten a little bit harder, here they are at 2 and 3. I'm thinking that's it. Florida, South Carolina, and Kentucky.
Well, we've got a huge game coming up Wednesday night. Florida is at South Carolina. And then on Saturday, South Carolina is at Kentucky. So, Joby, this is clearly South Carolina's week.
And, give South Carolina credit. They're actually getting, I think, the wins. That Ole Miss win is a win they wouldn't have gotten last year. They're starting to put things together. I actually think South Carolina, they're not going to be making a run to a protected seed, but South Carolina, I think, is as opposed to where they were last year after going undefeated for one of the last teams to lose last year. They just not fell off a cliff, but they really floated all the way down to where they deserve not to get in. I don't think this is a different team this year. I think you're going to see them solidly in the field when it comes in March, and Frank won't be sending me these really angry letters anymore.
And take a look at this right now, according to Ken Palm, South Carolina with the #1 defense in the nation. Very interesting stat there. Matt,
I will say this sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Matt about the game coming up tomorrow night. I know heading into the season you were kind of high on this Mississippi State team. Do we have a potential trap game here for Kentucky?
No, I'm not here. I think Mississippi State, I know I was kind of high on them. They've played a little better here in conference play, but I'm looking at 101st defense against Kentucky's #2 offense, and I think Kentucky rolls. And I think it's interesting, SEC, no one's been able to slow Kentucky down. There's one team I think might be able to that we briefly mentioned earlier that I still am keeping my eyes on to make a run, and that's the Georgia Bulldogs. But not Mississippi State. That's not the Kentucky Slayer.
Yeah, and Sleeker, you had a point you want to make about the conference?
Yeah, I was going to say in regards to South Carolina, it's not Ole Miss that gave them trouble last year. It was 3 losses to Georgia, although they've already gotten a win at Stegman, but also losing to Mississippi State and Missouri. That cannot happen again.
It's not looking like it would, but let's take a quick look over the American and Titel. The big game, one of the two, probably only 2 important games of the season happened this past week. Cincinnati beating SMU. These still both tournament teams clearly, well, especially on the SMUs. I would think Cincinnati is, but how about SMU?
I think clearly is a strong word, but I mean, I think that due to a weak bubble, they're looking pretty good, frankly. They could have won that game against Cincinnati on the road. That would have, I think, made them near lock to make the field. But when you have 0 bench points, it's hard to win in January, much less March. So while I love their starting 5, they got to get a little better bench for Coach Jankovic. Otherwise, you can't win. You can't consistently compete when you have no bench.
Right. That was their first loss since November, actually. But unfortunately, they also played teams like Delaware State and McNeese State in there. But you have wins over TCU. You have a win over Pittsburgh. Joby, is there a third team out of the American that could make a run here?
Well, sure. I mean,
that you see happening.
Tubby, et cetera. I don't know if the profiles are there without really digging in and whipping Cincinnati and SMU, who I both think. I mean, obviously, Cincinnati's very solidly in the field. I do think SMU is right now solidly in the field and requires a trip up. But of course, the American gives you a lot of chances to trip up, given its weak back end. Sure,
Matt.
Tulsa, Houston, UCF all have the potential, but the opportunities just aren't there. It's not like the Big 12 where I was talking about Texas Tech, TCU being a big game because not an elimination game, but those are the sort of wins you can get in to get ahead of your conference mate. Houston beats Tulsa, who cares? I mean, it's not like they're in the bubble or right on the edge of the bubble and they thus get the bonus.
I kind of enjoy watching anyone beat Tulsa.
Matt, you looking forward to any of these games coming up here this week in the American?
Yeah, that's what we mentioned. Here's a chance for Houston at SMU. They already lost their game against Cincy, so they're a team I kind of like. I mean, then, of course, I'm attracted to their number 40 spot in the KenPom, but this is a chance for them. They need a win like this to probably get in the field, and you lost your Cincinnati chance, here you go. This is one.
Yeah, I think they
Did
needed
you
to
realize
win.
that they lost by 7 at UCF this week as well?
Yeah, I think they needed that one after coming back. I mean, they would fall behind big and then come back and fall behind and come back. I think they needed that one at UCF.
Losing at LSU is more offensive than losing to Central Florida these days.
Well, I think if you win at SMU and you go, say, they're 18 games, I believe, in the American, so 13-5, 14-4. If you have a win at SMU there, that might be enough, especially with the bubble here, and especially given that you're the pretty clear number 7 conference and you only have 2 other teams.
And if
I
you
think
look,
they might
and if you look at
reason to grab a third.
yeah, but Matt, especially if you look at recent history, I mean, last year the committee put an American team in that had no business being in the field, so who knows?
Yeah.
But David, are we talking? Let's switch over to the Atlantic 10, and are we suddenly looking at a single bid league here?
Potentially. I mean, prior to this week, we had teams inside
I
the
think
bubble.
I think this is almost a must-win game for them. But if they pull it off,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think we have a little bit of audio problem there with Matt. Go ahead, David.
Oh, okay. But whenever you have Richmond in first place, and again, they were a team I liked coming into the season, and then the season started, and you liked them a lot less, and now they're in first place, and you really don't like the A10. They had a couple teams inside the bubble. I still think that their first place team will be inside the bubble, but probably not on the first ballot. But VCU could have done without that loss at Davidson, who's quite frankly just not very good.
Well, heading into this week, we had 3 teams that were at least really tracking in the Atlantic 10. Dayton, who loses to UMass, Rhode Island, who loses to LaSalle, and VCU, who loses to Davidson. Joby, do we just throw our hands up now and just say, go play the conference tournament, and we'll talk to you again in March?
I think Dayton and VCU have done enough right now to presently be inside. So I think we're looking at 2 right there. One of them could slide out if all of a sudden a Rhode Island makes a run in the tournament and wins it, or et cetera, and Dayton loses in the first round. Yeah, I'm just throwing out a hypothetical. A team to watch, that LaSalle win was a pretty good win. Just saying, let's watch what LaSalle does, because I actually like the A10s grouping, so to speak, your Masons, your St. Bonnies, your Rhode Islands, better than the Americans for the most part, especially with UConn playing the way they are this year. And so maybe you can pile something up if you're in there, as long as you get that big win against the top 2, even though their top 2 is not as good as the Americans' top 2.
Well, John T., Richmond's at Dayton coming up this week. LaSalle's at VCU. If one or both those teams can pick up those wins, is there reason to start talking about one of these 2 teams?
I mean, if Richmond stays undefeated in conference, you can start talking about them. But I think you're right about the conference tourney maybe deciding it all. As much as I want to give Dayton and VCU credit for playing tough non-conference schedules and past success, when you look at who they've beaten in the top 50 this year, VCU, it's nobody. Their best win is over a Middle Tennessee team at home by 3. Dayton's best win at home over a Rhode Island team that's barely top 50 by 3. Like, there's just not a lot of great wins on either of their schedules.
Well, let's turn to one final conference here. David, let me throw this over to you. We saw a round one of Gonzaga St. Mary's this weekend with Gonzaga. Did they prove themselves to you in that game?
Yeah, I mean, well, they had proven themselves to me already. St. Mary's, I realized Gonzaga ran away from them in the last part of the second half, but I mean, St. Mary's was right in there for the first 30 minutes or so. I still think Gonzaga is good enough to win out. I'm almost expecting them to win out. And if they do, don't you pretty much have to give them a 1 seed or expect that they'll get it? The one thing Gonzaga won't have that 1 seeds typically get is that true road win against a protected seed. Their schedule just doesn't allow it, but I'll defer to John T. I mean, if Gonzaga runs the table and finishes undefeated, don't you pretty much have to put them on the 1 line?
I think you would. We saw teams in the past from mid-major schools have gone undefeated. I believe Wichita State a couple years ago, and then St. Joe's back in the Jameer Nelson era. I want to look ahead to like the tournament to see. Kudos to Matt again for saying that they were going to be a top 2 seed, because I didn't believe it, but I'm becoming a believer, and he gets a lot of credit for that. There's not a lot of Northwestern area games in the tournament. There's a Salt Lake regional in the first and second round, San Jose, California for the regional. So their fans are going to have to travel. I think if it was something like in Seattle or Portland, I would really like push the Final Four. Not that geography is the only factor in the tournament, but I think there's something to it. And as much as they belong in the Final Four based on their talent and their undefeated record, I just can't do it based on the fact that they never make the Final Four.
Well, they haven't done it yet. Stalika, this St. Mary's team, are you still looking at them as a 4, 5, 6 seed? Have they fallen now that they've lost that game and they lost the Arlington game? Where are you with them?
It's tougher to get a protected seed without beating Gonzaga at least once, and you can't really count on BYU because the Cougs actually lost at San Diego. So at least we're not going to have brackety nightmares with BYU this year. So there is that.
Unless they get that auto bid.
Yeah, unless they get the auto bid.
That's still better than having to work them into Dayton, though, like we did 2 years ago.
That is true. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and pull down the screen here. And I do have one last question I want to run through each of you on. And this is something we do every year around this time. And the question is, we just went through all the conferences. Is there a team that you're looking at that we really are not discussing right now as being on a bubble or being just a very fringe bubble that you think is going to make a serious run? Or in the reverse, is there a team that we're talking about as a solid team that you think is going to completely fall apart? And David, you obviously want to go first.
Oh, yes. I mean, a team we don't spend nearly enough time talking about, we never have at any point, is this Nebraska Cornhuskers team coached by Tim Miles. I just can't.
Let me find that mute button. Okay, now let's go to somebody who can actually really answer the question, Matt.
All right, here's one that you probably could mute me for, too. I have not given up on the Syracuse Orange yet. They started to play a little better basketball. I know they lost today at Carolina, but a lot of people are going to do that. They're right in the top 15, both Ken Pom and Sagarin, and I know their RPI is hideous. They probably need to at least get that RPI somewhere in the 70, 80 range. But if they pick up the wins they do, they'll be there. And, hey, they got it last year, and I didn't really think they belonged in. So why not make it 2 in a row?
All right, Jovi.
Well, I purposely inserted 2 teams to watch already today with Georgia Tech and Penn State. Why don't I go to the same conference Matt was referring to and say 1-4 records could come into a big problem for Clemson and Pitt. There are going to be opportunities for them. They're probably in everyone's field, not necessarily high right now. But if the wheels start, they need to start picking up wins. They're not Florida State, who got in at a 6-10 record. They're going to have to get closer to 500 because while Clemson has that nice South Carolina win, et cetera, it's not like they were dominant out of conference. You've got to actually have a good conference record.
John Titel, do you have team or teams?
I got one of each. As far as fading, I would look at Creighton to fade simply because of this Mo Watson injury. I don't know how serious it is because it just happened. But this team is 18-1. That's like 1 seed contention. They've already played Butler, Xavier, Villanova, which means they still have to play, again, Butler, Xavier, and Villanova. There's no way they're beating those 3 teams without their point guard. As far as risers, as a Pac-12 guy, I lean Utah only because they lost UCLA by a single point, which is like a 1 seed caliber team as well. And I just love the additions of David Collette and Cedric Bearfield. You rarely see a team add 2 quality starter guys in December and January. I think they're really trending up despite the loss. And then the other one is Cincinnati. They've lost 1 game since Thanksgiving. It was at Butler. They have to go host Xavier on Thursday the 26th, and they still have to go to SMU. They're going to win so many games in the AAC. Like, this could be a 25-win team. And if so, that's like a top 4 seed in my opinion.
All right. Well, Salika, before I go to you, I want to throw my teams out there, actually. And I was actually looking until last night when Northwestern demolished them. I was looking at this Iowa team as a way outside shot that they could put things together. I actually already hinted at mine, though, earlier tonight, and I am keeping a serious eye on this Mississippi State team. I have not really liked anything that they've done, but they haven't done anything awful yet. And if they could do something like completely shock Kentucky tomorrow night, I think we could start talking about them. But let me turn to you, John S.
I'm not really looking as far as disappointments, but what I am curious to see is how long is LaSalle going to stay at least within a sniff of the consideration, because they did get a nice blowout win at Rhode Island, but what they were known for mostly early in the year were some near misses. One was against Villanova at the Palestra. They also had, I think it was an overtime loss against Temple in their season opener, and we know about their painful loss at home to Texas Southern. But at the same time, they still have some wins over, I guess, Florida Gulf Coast, Bucknell, and GW that are about as close to respectable as you're going to find on that profile of theirs. But I think we also hinted they're going to have a game coming up at VCU, so we'll be able to see if they're able to get another quality road win. They missed their chance at Dayton.
Yeah.
David, do you have a real team you want to give us?
One, and I'm a little surprised you didn't go there because you've been talking about them, at least on the Under the Radar podcast, all year. And now I agree with you. I think Illinois State could win out, with the exception of going to Wichita State and play their way onto or even inside the bubble. I think that they're not only – I think that their team is potentially better than what their paper is going to be, and their paper should be strong enough to get them in. And another team I like, we already touched on them, is I like this Utah team. I think they're getting better and better as the year goes along, and at the end they'll be there.
All right. Well, I guess on that note, let me run through with each of you for any final thoughts. And David Serrani, why don't we start with you?
I am incapable of thought.
You're incapable of thought. Well, that's no surprise. Salika.
I know we no longer mention the Mountain West as far as the main podcast goes, but it turns out there was quite a bit of extracurricular activity going on after Saturday's game between New Mexico and Colorado State. And depending on who you believe, it was also before, during, and after when some of the New Mexico State coaches were yelling at one or two of the Colorado State players after they had gotten what was a nice road win, but definitely marred by this altercation. And the Mountain West has already given both schools a slap on the wrist, but I don't think anything further is going to come out of it.
All right, Joby.
If in a couple of weeks people don't want to watch the god-awful Pro Bowl, please, people, don't watch it, because at 1 o'clock that day is going to be a fun little game, and that is the return trip of the Virginia-Villanova game. And that is going to – Villanova has already beaten, probably more when you do a quick shot of who's in the field, not in the field. Villanova is right at the top, and a lot of those pelts are out of conference. They could add yet another and show that, yes, we want to be the number 1 overall seed, and it's not even a question. Whereas Virginia, fighting for a protected seed, could make a run. Could this be where Virginia breaks through? It's going to be a great game. Ignore the Pro Bowl. Virginia at Villanova. Great game.
I think I watched the Pro Bowl once. I think it was about 1985, though. Titel.
I want to give a little shout out to the Detroit Titans of all people. So they come into their game on Friday the 13th, going to Oakland to play the Grizz. They're 2-14 with their 2 wins against some guy named Adrian and Western Kentucky at home. They go in there. They're down 12 points at the half. And they somehow get it going with their first-year coach, Bakari Alexander. They come all the way back to get a 93-88 win thanks to Jaleel Hogan's 39 points and 11 rebounds in only 31 minutes. Their first road win of the year, and might totally screw up Oakland's chances of making the tourney. Kudos to Detroit. I still can't believe it.
I can't either.
Matt.
All right. Here's given that the one of the people who like skilling about being on the hot seat this year. They have tailed as anyone in the WC.
All right, we seem to have a little bit of audio problems
Driving through a tunnel at the moment.
Yeah.
After the loss of San Diego. Okay.
Yeah. And Matt, we're having a little bit of audio problems with you here for a second. We'll try to get that cleared up. But David, do you have any real final thoughts before?
It seems like, whereas last year you had so much turnover at the top of the polls due to, I think, playing just the sheer number of road games against ranked teams, you haven't had that much this year. I mean, it seems like UCLA, there's a clear 3 or 4 teams that are kind of running away from everybody else, and Gonzaga, Kansas, UCLA, and Villanova. So I don't foresee down the stretch, at least for now, where we have 8 different number 1 seeds.
Well, Matt, we're going to try to get your final thoughts double next week because we're trying to get this audio cleared up here. But just my final note here, if you'd see my screen here, my hashtag Lance Up, I want to throw out there some congratulations to the Cal Baptist Lancers who announced this week that they are going to be moving up in the beginning of the 2018-19 season to the Division I level. They've accepted an invite to the Western Athletic Conference, one of our favorite under-the-radar conferences.
Yes.
So Cal Baptist and Lance Up coming to D1 and setting up that huge rivalry, crosstown rivalry with UC Riverside that we are going to be promoting because we all know how much better Cal Baptist is than UC Riverside.
How about cross country with Longwood?
Yeah.
Lancer versus Lancer, maybe. We'll work on that one too, Sleek. But on that note, on behalf of myself, Chad Sherwood, we got John Sleek over there, Matt Zakowski, John Titel, Joby Fordson, the puppet. I'm Chad Sherwood again. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again real soon.